It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Rina Gale. We're here in your beautiful home in Novoselice, Sion. And Rina, you are the director of the Pediatric Respiratory Care Center at Herzog. And you are one of Israel's most senior and eminent pediatricians specializing in premature babies. And it is such an honor and a privilege to be here. If you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you survived the Shoah.
Thank you, Dr. Glassman. I was born in 1933 and in Katowice, which was on the border of Poland and Germany. At that time it belonged to Poland. And as far as the Holocaust goes, I was hidden away for 22 months with my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, and 2 cousins by two very religious Polish spinsters who were religious and somehow got involved with us and couldn't get rid of us. They were scared. Every day was, of course, a survivor. It was very special, and the fact that we survived is due to the women, to my mother and my aunt, who carried on for 24 months, nearly 2 years, being hidden away and not being able to get out, not being able to talk aloud. But in spite of it, and being in the danger that we will be found out and killed, us and also the Polish people who had hidden us, in spite of that, those women took care of us, got us up every morning to brush our teeth and carry on and teach us, and we taught each other. I taught my 2 cousins, 2 younger cousins, who were about 5 and I was about 7, 8, 9 and so on. And we survived. They survived because they knew the children will not survive any kind of camps. They didn't know about the camps, about all the details at that time, although we were 25 kilometers from Auschwitz, but the facts were not known. But they carry on. They knew that the children will not survive in any kind of camp, so they kept like a routine. I think this is a real heroism. To teach the children, take care of the children in such condition without going out for a second, not even coming near the window. And we survived thanks to them, that they didn't give up during all those years. They were waiting for the second front, and the second front didn't want to open. They knew what's going on, of course they knew, but probably, I don't know, they don't realize, because they didn't lose hope even for 1 day. And that's how we survived till the end. And at the end, they had to give up the place where we were hidden away, because the German army was retreating and they needed the place. So they just took us, the 3 girls and 3 women. After being hidden away for 2 years, you can imagine how we looked. I remember they opened our shoes, so our toes were grown out, so they grew out. And the women, you can imagine how a woman who looks after 2 years not being in the hairdresser, not cutting her. And they left us on the main Sderot.
On the street?
Not a street. Sderot is like a park, and with our luck, we were found by the Polish I'm looking for the word in Polish or in English. They were people who were fighting the Germans.
The underground.
Underground, בדיוק, זה המילה. They found us places and we were hidden away for another 6 months, 8 months until the German retreated and the Russians came in and made us free. So this is the story of the...
Really, can I just ask, what is your earliest memories?
Sorry?
What is your earliest memories? Do you remember leaving your home? Or with
No, unfortunately I remember everything. I was 6 years old in 1939, so I remember everything. I remember my father walking around with a mask against gas, because the First World War finished with gas, so they expected that they will gas again. So they had something made of material, not like we have now. And my father, who managed to got away, he was the only man who survived from the family. The women survived, the men did not. I lost my grandfather, I lost my 2 uncles, and but we survived, the women survived. And my father managed to get away with all kind of nisim and came to Palestine in 1941, and he became a citizen of Israel. And when we came to Palestine after the war, we came on a so-called certificate, because he was already an official citizen of Palestine. So I can just tell you that out of the 3 million Jews who were in Poland in 1939, 300,000 survived, but it's not the real number, because some of the numbers of Jews who were in Russia and came back. But I survived.
And really, do you remember when you had to leave your home? When you
yes,
had to go to the hiding?
They were, as I told you, they were living on the border of Germany and Poland, Katowice, Schleswig. So they decided when the war started, the war was about to start, the 1st of September, as you know, the German lack round numbers. So just a few days before that, when it was already clear cut that they will invade Poland, they moved to Krakow. And the first time, beginning of the war, we were in Krakow. And my mother was, I'll tell you, my mother got appendicitis, was admitted to the hospital. This was before the German conquered Krakow. They were about to come to, they were advancing from the German border forward. And this I remember very clearly. My mother was in the hospital at that time. After appendicitis, you had to be in bed for a week in the hospital, as you know. And I remember there is a scene there. My mother is in bed, and grandmother and my grandmother with her around the bed, and my aunt and uncle, their little daughter, and my father and myself. We are all around my mother's bed, and it was decided at that time that we should run away to the east towards Russia, because the men were in danger, the women were not in danger. And they decided that the parents, my grandfather and grandmother, will stay with my mother in the hospital, and my uncle and Auntie Hela, and my father and myself, and my little cousin Tushka left, and were supposed to take the train going to the east. And that's how the war started.
And did you have any siblings? Any brothers and sisters? Did you have any siblings?
Any what?
Any brothers and sisters?
No, I was 6 when the war started, and at that time they voted for one child. I don't know. They had one. I was the first granddaughter. my grandparents were very proud of me. I can show you pictures if you want to. Anyway, what happened? We were supposed to take a train to the Mizracha, to the east.
To the east.
And the train was bombed by the Germans already, and so we never took this train. They took a cart with a horse, and we were going away together with hundreds and hundreds of people running away into the same direction. Not Jews, Polish people were escaping the war, and the Germans were coming down with a small little airplane with a terrible noise, and everyone was jumping down from the cart and the cars, whatever they had, on top of the children, and they were shooting whoever they could. That's how the whole started. The escape to the east, like Hemingway's Farewell to Arms. Have you read that? This is the scenes from that, which I remember very clearly.
And how did your parents know about the Gentile spinsters? How did they know about the non-Jews that kept you?
I don't know the whole story, but evidently they were living in a small. At certain times, German gave an option either to go to the ghetto in Krakow or to go to the places where we were originally from, which was a little village, Skała, by the name of Skała. And my grandfather at that time, he was the head of the family. My father was away. He decided to take the whole family to this little place, and we were there. And they came in contact with all kind of Polish people, of course. Some of them they knew beforehand. I don't know how they contacted those two ladies. My grandfather, they had some kind of a shop, and through this they came in contact. It wasn't sure what will happen now, how is. Evidently they kind of talked them into suggesting that they can come to us if something wrong happens. That's how it started. And then when they had those what is called akcja, the last akcja, there was no Jew was left in this little town. And this is a story for you to tell to others. As I told you, the family came from this little town, and the great-grandfather, the family was living there, and during the First World War, they were living from smuggling, from coming, I don't know, all kind of goods from the Austrian side to the Russian side, I don't know. And my aunt, this famous Auntie Hela, suddenly she remembers that in a house where we were living near door, there was a place where they hiding the leathers in a flat place, and she said, let's go there. And we went there. Downstairs was, of course, Polish citizens were living there, but we knew them. We knew them. We were friendly with them, and she talked them, Auntie Hela and my uncle. They talked them into taking us up there to this hiding place where the letters were kept in a little open between two floors. And I remember everything. Not that I don't remember. I do. Unfortunately, I remember. So we were light there for 3 days. We could just go out, to the main place. It was like a hiding. It was a hiding place. It was a. I don't know what they did there. The fact is, after 50 years later, we went there with my husband to see it, and until now he can't forget it. He didn't believe it. Anyway, so we were there for a few days, 3 days, when the Germans were still around. And then my grandmother, the owner of the store downstairs, of the inn downstairs, she had us upstairs. She didn't know what to do, how to get rid of us. She was walking out with her son and talking aloud to him. We have visitors upstairs. What were we going to do? And my grandmother said, you could hear from the second floor down. Go to the priest and tell them that this family with this name, they also knew us, is up there. He'll help you to take us out. They opened the thing, let us out. At that night, in the winter, I still hear the dogs barking. And when we came back later, I was already, no, it was 50 years old. I was already in my 40s. We went to this place. The place still exists as it was. And the young man who walked with his mother and talked, he was there as of course, grown-up person. He asked me, tell me, were you the older girl or the younger girl? I was the older girl. And they let us out, and then we walked 3 kilometers in the wood, in the snow, until we got to this place. We entered the place where the 2 ladies, the 2 spinsters were living, and we stayed there for nearly 2 years. And
do you remember their name?
What?
Do you remember the name of the spinsters?
The first names? Pani Marysia and Pani Władzia. We were in contact with them after that, after the war. And they were in terrible danger because it was a small place. They owned a little hotel near Kraków. You know, it's like in Jerusalem. You know who Dr. Ticho is? Dr. Ticho had a summer house near Mevaseret here. This was considered to go out of town for 25 kilometers. So people were coming for the weekends to this little hotel, just for the weekend. And so they had room for us, and we stayed there. It's a story. Tough.
And did you have enough food? Did you have enough food during the time you were in hiding?
Yeah, it was a terrible problem for them, because in a small place like this, if you buy another, instead of 1 bread, 2 breads, they will say, what for? Who for whom? So every 2 weeks they would go to Kraków, to the big town, and buy things, food to cook, and we were never short of food. No.
And were they given Chassidah Motalam?
Yes.
They were given?
Yes. My aunt was very close to those ladies. One of them passed away during the war for natural reasons, and the second one remained. Passed away, you know, this is the 2 generations there before.
And Rina, what did you do during the day if you...
It's a story. Without a psychologist and without a
Did your mother tell you stories, or did you...
You see, I can't stop talking. We were during the summer, we were in a little room near the attic. And I could get out from this little room to the big attic, which was like an enormous place for me at that time. I was 7, 8, and you know, it was semi-dark, and only the sun would come from the roof, and they had treasures there. First of all, they kept newspapers. They didn't throw, at that time they didn't throw newspapers. They had newspapers from 10 years ago. And at that time, in those Polish papers, they were continuous stories, all kind of romantic stories, continuous. So this little girl, 8 years old, I could already read, I could write. I can't write till this very day in 3 languages, but anyway, I could read. They taught me how to read. So I would read the stories in the newspapers, and there were all kinds of old things which were put away there. So I looked at that. During the day I was in the big place where I could. But we got food, and we had mice there who would eat the bread. So the bread was hanging at night was hanging, because if you put it away they would eat the bread. And what I was doing, I had a little garden, where they brought us, for instance, not potatoes, but things which grow, which are growing, potatoes also. So I kept the things which were growing, and with my toothbrush I would water them. And I was terrorizing the two little girls who were playing. We had some games to play, because when she went to Krakow, she would bring us sometimes a book, sometimes, especially for me, because they couldn't read until, they were too small to read. And that's why I never knew how to ride a bicycle, because at that age I couldn't. But then it was too late. My husband tried to teach me, but it was too late.
And Rina, what did your mother do during this time?
But
your mother, did she help in the house? Could she?
My mother was not. She was retracting, and she got complaining on migraines. She was a very energetic person. After the war, she ran the whole committee for Jews who came from the camps. It's another story. But my grandmother didn't talk much. First of all, we didn't let her talk at all, because somebody could hear, she had a terrible Polish accent, a Yiddish accent in Polish. She was at that age, at that time she was very old, she was 52 maybe. So they didn't let her talk much, because the accent sometimes somebody could hear maybe. And my aunt, Auntie Hela, she was the one who was fighting with us to get us up and to learn whatever we could. And I was the main teacher, of course. And to get dressed, to brush our teeth, to keep, like every day was every day, although we couldn't get out at all, not even come to the window. I don't know how they survived. They survived because the adults, and they knew what's going on. I mean, the Germans were everywhere. Imagine 41, 42.
Could you see outside the window German soldiers, or did they ever come
There
nearby?
were no German soldiers. There were koshy Polish, the blue, the police. But there were no Jews. They were not looking for Jews from time to time, but they were looking for radios. So we were searching the whole neighborhood, and we had to hide because we were afraid they would come up to look for a radio and they'd find us.
And you never went outside?
No.
So you never saw
I have seen the house from the other side after 30 years, when I came back.
And the sun, you never... It's amazing, because without having the sun,
we were in good conditions in comparison to other people who were in all kind of halls. We were in a little room. Now, when they have guests, for the weekend guests, we really were not allowed, we couldn't even talk.
And did any of the neighbors suspect that something was happening?
No.
And all the time?
It was a secret. It was a house, a little house, a little motel. A separate,
Did you ever ask the Spencers why did they do it? Because they really put their lives in such tremendous danger.
They were very religious, but they didn't do it because they wanted to. They got involved, but they couldn't get rid of it. They couldn't get rid of us. Can you imagine the situation? They knew that if they tell us to go, it will be death. They were really saints.
But were they kind to you? Were they very kind? Were they not?
Yes.
It's That's amazing.
I don't know. You see, I don't know everything. And of course, they needed money, so all the jewelry that they had, they sold in Krakow and so on. I don't know.
Did you come from a very wealthy family?
You don't believe me, yeah?
It's you know, what they did is so incredible. It's Rina, you know, it's amazing, because if they would have been found, they would have been, and it happened where they did, people informed, and then whole families were killed. The non-Jewish families were killed. They were hiding Jews.
I'm telling you.
Why did they tell you to go near the end of the war? Why did you have to go to the field? Why did you have to leave the house?
Only when the German retreated. The German is a whole story. The Polish people decided when the Russians were coming, the Polish people decided in Warsaw, they will also show the Russians that they can fight. And you remember there is a history. So they decided to fight the Germans. The Russians stood aside for nearly 2 years and let them fight each other until they killed half of the Polish. This is the merit not of the Jews or the Polish people. And we were waiting for the Russians to come from day to day. Now, but then the Germans were going from the east to Germany, going back to Germany. So what happened, this is one of the nice stories. At a certain time, the Bachteret, the underground, put us in a place with a very nice, for that time, house with 3 or 4 stories. And the apartments there were occupied by German officers, and we went down there. And then when they left, they left suddenly. They were retreating, the German. So there was a day and night where there were no Germans, and the Russians were just coming. So my grandmother, who didn't open her mouth for 3 years, told the woman who was the concierge give me the keys of the German who left. So she didn't know what to say, gave her the keys. We went upstairs and we had an apartment. We were the only Jews in Krakow who had an apartment, and everybody who came from the camps, even if I remember with what they were wearing, would come to us and sleep overnight with us.
And how long did you stay there?
At that time already, journalists started coming with the Russians, and so my mother sent a message to my father, we didn't know if we are alive or we are dead. We didn't hear from us for 3 years. And you don't know, you haven't been in Israel at that time, but in Palestine at that time, they were, after the news, for an hour you could see Moshe is looking for Yaakov and Yaakov is looking for... And my mother sent a message with a journalist to say to Chaim that Hannah and Rena are alive. And not everybody listened to the radio, but a cousin of my mother who was living in Tel Aviv, and he was the contact, because during the whole war we were told, all of us were told, that if whoever survives will go to Palestine, to Tel Aviv, to look for number 8, אני כבר שכחתי עכשיו, Brenner Street, number 8 Brenner Street, because that's where Michael, the cousin, lived. So we all remember number 8 Brenner Street. So the cousin from number 8 Brenner Street heard on the radio that Anka and Rena are alive. And my father was living here in Palestine at that time. We came in 41, I told you. A young man, 33, who was married for 7 years and had a daughter of 6. He didn't know if we are living or not. I don't know what he did, but I hope. He was a young man, you know, for so many years. And Michael was afraid to tell him that we are, he didn't know what to do, how to tell him that we are alive. So on a Shabbat, he heard it on the Shabbat, on a radio, so he went there and knocked on the door and said, "Chaim, I have news."
Must mean the best news he had ever heard. It's unbelievable.
Okay, now...
And Rina, can I just ask, when you saw your father, how was the interaction?
I'll tell you the story, because this is a story you should know. My mother, in the meantime, when the Russian came, she became a secretary for all the Jews. She was a big shot. She was also, before the war, she was very active. She was running a big business. So immediately she started organizing. After the migraine that she had, she came alive. She was a typical. She was very active, and so we started to have a connection with my father. So and this was 45, January 45. The Russians, we got out of hiding, and then all the Jews who survived in Poland wanted to leave. Didn't want to stay, of course, but in addition, my mother was telling me about my father all the time. So the natural thing was to come to Palestine and to join my father, but I think she had some second thoughts. You know, she hasn't seen him for 7 years. It wasn't pashut, it wasn't simple. And at that time, this I also have to tell you, you know, the men were all killed, Polish men and Jewish men, but the suits remained. There were no clothes, no nothing, but the men's suits remained. So my mother, after thinking, she decided to come and join her husband, my father. So they said for hours they were sewing the suits, making from the pants skirts, and you remember it? You don't remember, of course. Wearing the jackets with the big cushions here, like
lapels. They had like.
You remember that?
I've seen pictures.
So my mother dressed herself, decided to come with me. And another of the stories of Israel, many men were here whose wife were killed by the German. So if he was, I don't know, Zilberman, so they sent a certificate for Mrs. Zilberman. Makes no difference. So my grandmother came with my cousin Tushka, with the cousin who spent as a boy. She was a boy for six, dressed as a boy of 6. My grandmother became a woman of 45. We arrived on boat from France, and we arrived in Haifa on the hottest day I can think. It was July, and 46, and we were in the ship. Legally we had certificates, but they didn't let us go off because there were many who were hiding with us, not legal, and we could see my father waiting at Haifa there. And my grandmother said to me and to the Tushka, to the girl who became a boy, "You stay here with me and let Anka go and meet her husband after 7 years." Imagine that. And she was all dressed up with a hat, you know, the fashion of 39, because at 45 there was no fashion in Poland. So she came down, and I don't know if you have any idea how Palestine looked. It wasn't Israel yet, it was Palestine in 46. You know, they were walking, the men with shorts, and no money, they had their portion, but nothing to compare to ours. And my mother approached my father after 7 years, and the first thing he said to her, "Anka, remove your hat," because nobody was wearing hats. And she never forgave him for the "Anka, take off your hat."
And when you saw your father,
Listen, there was a period, it wasn't
but the
easy.
initial
The
meeting,
period of adjustment
it
wasn't
must have
easy.
been very emotional.
I never called my father Abba, and I couldn't call him Tatuś because I didn't use the word. So it ended up with Abek, and my husband and my children used to call him Abek. He was Abek for all of us. I made it, I don't know how it worked out, but my parents, just to know that there is a happy ending, they had some difficult time, I think. I don't know everything, because I was already 12 and a half. But they stayed together as long as they lived. My mother was adored. My father was supposed to be so handsome, a short Jew. And he was the one who taught me how to dance. He liked theater, and my children remember him so fondly. You can't imagine.
And did you develop a very close immediately, or did it take time to develop a connection with your father?
It was complicated. Listen, my mother was the one who made the decisions. She was the one who was running this thing. Sorry. But my father was always, taking us to the theater, going here, going there. He liked going out. So they were very attached to each other.
And Rina, your parents, their family was at a very Zionistic home in Poland. Were they very Zioni? Were they very Zionistic before the war?
Not. They were not.
So how did your father decide to come to Palestine?
I'll tell you in short. Poland was in 3 weeks conquered by the Germans.
Very quick.
And then there's a border with Romania. And Romania, I don't know why and how, opened the border for 3 days and said, whoever wants to come over to Romania, let him come. Now my father was a great, he was afraid of everything. He was a typical Jew. He was afraid of everything. He was a very smart and intelligent person, but he was the one who, and thanks to the fact that he was so scared, he survived. All the men went, and he survived. So I was the only one who remained with the father. My cousins didn't have fathers because my uncles were killed. My grandfather was killed. I don't want to tell you all those details. So I was an object of envy because we had a whole family. I had a mother and a father.
And you had a grandmother.
I was the lucky one.
You had a grandmother as well.
But what happened is that my father, as I told you, when my mother was ill, my father was with my uncle and my aunt and Tushka and the little girl and me, the 2 girls, and they arrived at the border to Romania, running away to the east. They reached the border, and this time I don't know the details. I know the story. I don't remember the detail. The men, my father and my uncle, went to the border, and they told them, you can cross. But my aunt with the children, with the 2 girls, was in a motel, I don't know, 20 kilometers from the border. So my father evidently said, go bring the children and Hannah, and we'll cross. So my uncle went to fetch his wife and his daughter and me. I told you 25 kilometers. when they arrived to the place where they're supposed to meet, in some kind of a hotel or something, my father left a message, cross after me, I already crossed. And that's how he survived. Now my aunt said, what, to cross there? I heard that they are, collecting all the people who cross and putting them into some kind of camps. And, no, let's stay here.
It's a miracle. It's really a miracle.
The miracle was that I lost my uncle. He was killed. My two uncles were killed at the same time, and he, because she was so hesitating. I don't blame her. She was so hesitating. And my father, because when I married Joe, he couldn't understand how a man leaves his child of 6 and crosses the border. You can never put yourself in the place of somebody in such situations. I never blamed my father. I was the lucky one.
And Rina, I'm going to ask you a very difficult question, but have you ever thought, if you were put into the position that those two spinsters were, if somebody came in, if the tables were reversed, could you put your life in danger or your family's life in danger?
I doubt it.
It's the most difficult question to... Those two spinsters, what they did is just... It's just incredible.
That's what we call it in Hebrew, histapchu. They got in...
They're really the righteous amongst the nations. They... like angels. And when you came to Israel, well, Palestine was under the British mandate, and you went to school, how did the other children, did they accept you, or was it also difficult?
Were horrible.
We've heard so many stories that it was very hard for survivors.
I tell you, that nobody realized what we went through. They didn't, until the Mishpat Eichmann, they didn't realize what we went through. They were calling us Sabonim,
And somebody called that to you?
No, but when I came, I went to school. The first time I was dressed like a Polish girl going to school with a little apron and white socks. And when I approached the teacher said, come to me, I approached the teacher, so I made a little, bow.
You bowed on it?
The whole class burst in laughter. Look, they could have explained they should have explained to the children that the child is coming now from such a horrible experience. But they themselves didn't realize. They didn't. I don't blame them. The teachers didn't explain a thing. There was another thing which is typical to Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, I don't know now, but at that time, the schools belonged to the municipality, not to the Misrad HaChinuch, not to the... And there was a system, they had a system, there were 30 children in a class, and together from Kita Aleph. First of all, they all learned English, which I didn't know, but this is another story. But they were the top 6. Gradually, they know who are the top 6. The top 6 were afterwards accepted to high school free, at especially good schools. Others had to pay for the high school.
Like a bursary.
Okay, so when I came, I didn't know English, I didn't know Hebrew, I didn't know what the word Tanakh means. I didn't know what it means, Tanakh, Mother. I didn't know what it is. Didn't know the language, didn't know mathematics, didn't know English, didn't know anything.
Did you come from a traditional family?
No. My grandfather, they were going to shul and on Hagim, but otherwise my parents didn't speak Yiddish. I mean, they do Yiddish, but they didn't speak Yiddish. They were more assimilated. But nobody would teach me Hebrew when? Not in the hiding place, for sure. Anyway, I had some courses during the years. When the Russians came in January and we came in June next year. So during this time I went through 2 schools. It makes no difference. I read the whole story. But when I came here, I was lost, and nobody was helping because you was a pseudonym. So I became very aggressive, of course, and I had 1 or 2 friends befriended me, but nothing special. And then I learned. I was running around Tel Aviv with private lessons. I was the only child. My father, they didn't have money, but what they had was spending on me. I remember myself all the time with private lessons. And after, imagine this, we arrived at the beginning of the year. And towards the end of the year, I was already getting good grades. And then another year passed, and I pushed the number 6 down, and I became number 6. And then I was accepted to the best school in Tel Aviv, free.
Which school was it?
Tichon Ironi Aleph. And my father was very proud of me. Not to mention the fact that he didn't have to pay for the grades for the school, for the high school. And then it's late. I'll tell you just one story, so we'll end up in a nice story. How did I met my husband? My father was very smart. I caught up with the mathematics, the Hebrew, the Tanakh, the Cheshbon, whatever. But English, I couldn't catch up with the English. I had private lessons. It didn't go. I have no inclination to languages. So my father at that time, this was 1950, I was already with the excellent high school. It was a good student, everything was fine. And but the English didn't work out. It was a problem. So my father said, you can only learn a language when you are in an environment who speaks the language. But at that time, the situation, there was no money, there was nothing, So at that time, nobody's even heard about, how do you call it, the English schools abroad. So my father said, we should send Rina to a family who speaks English. You can imagine the end, already. So I didn't want to, because I already had friends, many friends, boyfriends. I was beginning to date. I was 17. So I was very popular at that time already. And I didn't want to go anyway, but my parents insisted. I have to improve my English. They found a family in Ramat Gan who had a married daughter in England. They left London and came to Israel. And I knew they had a son who was in a kibbutz. It happened to be kibbutz Navi. So, but nobody had a telephone, and you would write letters, no connection. I was writing letters. They sent me there to this family, to this old people who were 45 years old, so this old couple. And I had to learn everything. This is the table, this is this. Anyway, I would sit and read with the lady. Jerusalem Post was Israel, it was Palestine Post at that time. Column 1, we're sitting and reading. It was terrible. I was writing letters to my friends in Tel Aviv. It was boring. And I knew they had a son in a kibbutz. This I know. But one morning I was there writing letters to my friends, and Mrs. Gale went shopping, and then somebody knocks on the door. So I opened the door, and then stepped this young man with his shorts and red nose, Kova Tember, and he says, "Excuse me, slicha," and he shuts the door. Because so I said, he must be the son from the kibbutz. he'll come back, he'll be back. After 2 minutes, 3 minutes, he knocked again. So I said, come in, are you the son of Mrs. Gale? So he says, yes. And who are you? Are you working here? So I said, no, I'm studying here. And the best, everything is history from there on.
So from the first moment, that's that's amazing. Sure.
I thought you'd like the story.
That's beautiful. And Rina, wow, that is, your life has been the most, it's incredible.
What is incredible?
No, what you've gone through, it's amazing. It's just something, your parents, your whole, it's amazing.
No, one thing that you can learn from the story is that you don't have to go to elementary school at all, because I didn't go to school till the 6th year. They only taught me how to read.
And Rina, I have to ask you, when you were now in Tel Aviv, in Palestine, it was still under the British, and when it became Israel, you remember when the state was declared? I'm sure you must remember.
I remember everything. I remember Ben Gurion. I remember the decisions that he made at the first day where the decision was made in the United States about Palestine. Of course,
and
I remember
the Ahmed trial and the Kastner trial. All
this was very traumatic, because at that time I was married. Imagine this stupid thing. I started medicine. My mother said, a married woman I got married at the age of 21, and I wanted to be a doctor. My mother said, a married woman can be a physician. This is out of the question. So I showed them that it can be done. But anyway, at that time, we were married and living in one room. We were both students at the time. We were married for 5 years, and my mother started nudging, what about a child? What about a child? Leave me alone. I'm in the 5th year of medicine. How can I? But she didn't let me go, and I became pregnant with Tali, my daughter. And at that time we had to rent an apartment because we couldn't live in one room. And so we rented an apartment opposite, which is now where Eichmann was judge in this place, which is a theater.
It's near Betzalel.
And this was opposite on the other side. So there was no television, but we knew everything what's going on. Tali was born in 1960, so I was really pregnant at that time, and I had the obsession that at night when they take Eichmann from the theater, which was the theater at that time, to where they took him, he'll run away and come over to me and kill us. And Joe was so smart, he would say, don't worry, if he manages to come, I'll kill him. I'll kill him with my 2 hands. I was so scared, I can't tell you.
And you followed the case? You followed?
As much as we could. I was in the 6th year of medicine at that time, but the newspapers were around.
And did you speak to your parents? Could you speak openly about the Shoah? Or was it a subject?
We didn't talk much about that. We knew. At that time, one didn't talk about the Holocaust.
And did any of your school friends, did they ask you questions about Europe or
No,
hiding?
we didn't talk about it.
You never spoke about
In
it?
the high school already, I was at the end of the elementary school, I was already at the top of the class. And they didn't want to start with me, and I was very aggressive. I had to survive.
And with your kids, did you speak about the Shoah with your children?
Not really. I spoke with my son. My son is in the reserve duty. He's Aluf Mishneh. And then they organized, the high officers went to Auschwitz for one of those, Yom HaShoah. So I said, listen, now that you are going there, we have to have a talk. And he came here downstairs to my office, and I told him what I thought he has to know. And I wanted him, there is one burial place of my grandfather that we know where it is. But the rest. So I told him, we have been there with Joe, and we said Kaddish. And it was the old cemetery, Jewish cemetery in this little village. So I told Irad, look, I want you to go there and say Kaddish after your grandfather. He's named after him. His name, Irad Yekutiel. My grandfather's name was Yekutiel. And when Irad was little, he would complain, what is the second name now? Yekutiel. I said, shut up. This is your name after your grandfather who died for Kiddush Hashem. But he didn't realize it. But when he went there and they seen everything, he took a friend with him. They went there to this place, to the cemetery, which is part left. The rest they ruined there, but this was left. So he was there, and he lighted a candle and he said Kaddish after his grandfather.
It's amazing. And Rina, can I ask, what message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations?
I'm afraid they know, they feel, they don't know the details. Even for Joe, it's difficult to hear the details. He doesn't remember the chronology. He doesn't want to remember. When we went to Poland, he couldn't stand it. We went back. I decided that I'll go to Poland only if I have a reason. I was invited to give a talk about my work in jaundice of newborns. So I had a reason to go. But when we came there, we just couldn't stand it. And Joe said, look, let's go back. So I said, well, I have a lecture to give. So write them a letter that for personal reason you can. I never did it before and not after. But we couldn't stand it. We couldn't stand it. So I told Joe we will not get, this was, I'll tell you when it was like 32 years ago. And we will not get a ticket back from Poland to Lida. So I said, I'll queue the whole night, I'll get a ticket. And he got a ticket and we came back.
You just felt you couldn't be there.
It was, people don't realize, they go to Poland for shopping. You stand there. Have you been in Poland? Have you been in Warsaw? Have you been in the place where they used to send them to?
It's too terrible.
The station, the station, the train station where they send them from. I could hear the children crying. I couldn't stand it. We took a car. I landed in Warsaw. I was in a meeting in the States. From the meeting, I decided to go out to give this lecture in Poland. So I came from New York. I came to Warsaw, and Joe came from Israel to Warsaw, and we met at the airport. And we decided, stupid us, to take a car, like we used to do, like we always do in the States or everywhere, with a map, and started going from Warsaw to Krakow. And on the way there was a crossing. We couldn't decide if to take the right. It wasn't clear. So we got off the car, and I look and I see a house. I tell Joe, look, this house is written here in Hebrew. So he said, maybe it's Yiddish and Hebrew. So we went. This was on our third day of being in Poland, and I wanted to see one of the people who helped us. So I look at this, and it says there were 300 Jews, put them there and burned the place. So I said to Joe, Gamarno. We couldn't stand it anymore.
They had a sign. Because after the war, there were pogroms.
Poland is beautiful. We were there, it was at summer. Everything was flowering, the lilac flowers, beautiful. But we couldn't stand it. We could enjoy it. We could.
And Rina, now what's happening in Israel with...
That's why I told you I don't want to talk about it, but you made me talk.
But Rina, I'm so grateful to you. Really, but do you have hope? You have hope with what's happening in the country when they say never again, and now it's happening. What's happening in from October the 7th?
Let's not talk about it. It's terrible.
But you have hope that please God it will get better. That will, because you've been through the worst, and
who told you we went through the worst?
In the Shoah, what
you have those people in the north who are waiting.
I know. But we have to have hope.
So I have to ask you a question. What are you doing here? You can be it's South Africa. I know it's also not a pleasure.
No, there's no other country I'd be. There really is. There's no other country. I wouldn't want to be in any other country. Oh, Rina, I just want to thank you. I'm so incredibly grateful to you. This is your grandparents.
Well, first, my mother is 6.
And it's 120 years old, this picture.
Yeah.
This is the whole family.
Before the war, when I was 6 when the war started, and here I am, I think 3, and this is the 25th anniversary of wedding of my grandparents. The Saba Yekutiel, Irat is named after him. And this is my mother and my father. Auntie Hela, who made us brush our teeth every morning. And those 2 uncles were
You may want to leave these, but you don't have much.
Dear Prof, there are no words to express my deep and sincere appreciation for having the honor and the privilege to meet you and to hear your story, which is absolutely remarkable, full of courage, determination, miracles. It's phenomenal. And you truly are someone we should all strive to emulate. I am extremely grateful to you, and just wishing you and your husband and your family, your children, grandchildren, and please God, great-grandchildren, only nachas and mazal and bracha, which you so deserve. You are really a remarkable person. What you've achieved and how you have triumphed over such adversity, it is something absolutely phenomenal, and I am extremely grateful to you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.